helped organize it and was doing the media and so forth, was a guy I befriended. And I talked to him and I found out he was Jewish, he looked Jewish. And then I found out something else. He had a background that was similar to my own family. Mixture of Catholic and Jewish. And he told me his testimony, how he went into the Roman Catholic priesthood, how he was slated to actually be a bishop at one point, but then he came to his senses. He's going to tell us both halves of his life. He's going to tell us why he left Roman Catholicism today as a priest, and he's going to tell us his views of Judaism and his Jewish identity tomorrow. So he'll be sharing both, first the Catholic, then the Jewish. I don't know whether we didn't contrive this or plan it or anything. I don't know whether to pray for him in Hebrew or in Latin. What do you think?
Both. Yiddish.
I can only read it. English? Okay, well, we'll pray in Hebrew and then we'll pray in Latin. Keep everybody happy. אבינו מלכנו, אני מודה לך בשביל האח הזה אנא אדוני תברך אותו, תשפוך רוחך אליו לדרוש בכוח של הרוח הקודש על ידי ישוע האדון, בשמו אנחנו מתפללים. Sheldon, dentro Hebrew Rotary Day. A day really to be back with you doing the mail. All right, oratre fratres, pray my brethren. Suscipia Dominus sacrificium, de manibus tui, et laudem et gloriam nobilis sui. Ad utilitatem quoque nostrum, profiusque ecclesiae sui sanctae. Amen. That's what I like about Catholic priests. You got the cash, they got the absolution.
Buy your way to heaven.
It is my pleasure and blessing to welcome from Manitoba, Canada, Brother Sheldon Chartier.
Good afternoon, all. Good afternoon. Hello, hello. Yes, are you on now? Just like to say thank you to Jacob for the invitation. It's been wonderful being here. The last 3 days have been incredible. I got to meet with the team that runs Moriel behind the scenes and worked with them yesterday, and they are a fantastic group of people. And I can identify with them because in Winnipeg I've been working the Prophecy Conference for the last 26 years, and they have become my family and my spiritual brethren there. And I work with them often on various projects and other ideas besides setting up our conference, which is rather large. And now the Friends of Israel have taken over our conference as of this year. And Menno Kalisher, of course, was there just a few weeks ago. In Winnipeg, we did our conference at the end of September, which is our usual time. And I got to meet Jacob on, I believe, 2 occasions or 3 occasions over the last 10 to 12 years in Winnipeg. And I'm blessed to be asked to come and to speak on the subject that I have. I just want to start off by saying, I'm going to take you back around 40 years ago when this all started and when I came to this, because when I'm coming into this conference and they asked me to speak on where I was and what I was doing and how I was doing it, I had to go right back to the beginning of why I went into the priesthood and why I needed to be in the priesthood and what it meant for me. So I'm going to go back to those points, and I'm hoping that you'll bear with me on some of the things I have to say and will do. But in the meantime, I would like to start off with a prayer. And the prayer that I'd like to start with is that, Lord Jesus, Father God, I want to ask you in your name, in your holiness, for me to touch their hearts today with your word and your grace and your love as you have touched my heart. And if I can do this, then I will have lived the life of taught of your scriptures. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. So every great story starts with a little bit of a journey. And mine was a passion for knowledge. and a passion for truth. And it sounds kind of cliche, every young man's on that path. But when I was 21, I decided and hoped to enter a Franciscan order through an orphanage I was working at in Winnipeg. I went into the orphanage and was welcomed by the nuns and took care of the kids for 2 years, from 77 to 79. And I enjoyed it very much. I loved the kids and we got along very, very well. But in that time, stationed at the convent that was there, St. Joseph's Convent, we had kids, 12 kids of the younger kids and 12 or so of the older kids. And I was looking after the younger kids, pushing to work with them. And I was really privileged to work with these kids. And at that time, there was a Franciscan Capuchin monk stationed with us that would work with us part-time. And I took his instruction as I came into the group and got to know him pretty well. And he says, how did you get to know any Franciscans? Well, years and years ago, and when I was in grade 7, I met a father, priest, Franciscan Capuchin, named Gerald Craig, out of Ontario, Georgetown, Ontario. And they had the mother house in Blenheim, Ontario. And I said I was really impressed with this priest, and he brought me up, and he worked with us to my grade 7 year, and would often be a substitute teacher in our classroom. So I got to know him pretty well, and what he had done, because of his connections, he would get us movies that came from the theater after they left the theater, because most of the kids couldn't afford the theater, and he would bring them to the church basement on Saturday afternoons, and we get to watch the movies. So I got a connection with this priest, and a very wonderful connection, and really enjoyed him. A few years later, at this place, and that must have been the mid-60s. Lo and behold, Father Gerald Craig is the head of the house in Winnipeg at St. Felix Friary, which Brother Jerome, working with us at the orphanage, was part of that group. So he says, interesting story. I'll have to get you to meet someone. So I was invited over for supper at the Friary. Lo and behold, Father Gerald Craig is there. I hadn't seen him for all the years since grade 7 until I was 22 years old. It was wonderful to see him again. And within a short period of time, because of his impression on me and the books that he left me when he left for Blenheim and went to another parish, and I never got to see him after that, he left me the Omnibus of Sources, which is the compendium of all the books that were written about St. Francis of Assisi. This is the Saint of Assisi that blesses the animals and talks to the birds. I was very impressed with this and very impressionable. But at that time I was looking for a hero. St. Francis was going to fill that position as my hero. I went in and was hoping to be able to be associated with them. I started an associate year, a candidate year, and then I started to learn their methods, their ways, how they approached things, how they thought. I started to live in orders with them and live in community with them. And I eventually went on to the novitiate, then simple vows, solemn profession, and then a diaconate just prior to being ordained a priest. I didn't quite make it all the way. In that time, a lot of things had transpired. And I'll go back to what had transpired in that time. But I thought I was blessed, and I was overjoyed when I did have the association, and I did get accepted in August of 1979 into the order. I was accepted as the first novitiate in the order of Western Canada. There was 50 men in the order of the Vice Province of Central Canada. And I was asked to come in, and I was overjoyed and delighted at the prospect of working with these people, of living out a dream of being a Franciscan, of teaching, of serving, and of going to Chad in South Africa was one of their missions, and working with the poor in South Africa. I never made it to South Africa. I started going in and working in the seminary. I did fairly well in scholastics. I learned very quickly. The Latin came very quickly, and I was able to reiterate everything they taught us very quickly. And this was just right at the end of the Latin terms, from 1977 to 81. And they stopped using it basically in 81, most of the Latin So I learned quite a bit of the Latin, and I was being prepared to go to Chad. And I just happened to meet upon going to a center of commerce and a center of thing in Regina, Saskatchewan, not far from my home in Winnipeg. And that's about 5-hour trip. And they asked me to work at the center for a period of time, about 4 months was my station there. And I had met, while making coffee, which part of my duties was to make coffee and prepare for the retreatants that were coming to St. Michael's Church and Seminary. So I was in the monastic enclosure in the seminary, and enjoying that. I got to meet a man named James. He touched my shoulder and he asked me if the coffee was ready. James, wonderful, wonderful man. We talked for the next 2 days, and over that period, I was able to help him with various things. We didn't find out till the end of the second day that he was the bishop, because he was in a Hawaiian shirt. A Hawaiian shirt in August in Winnipeg. It's really odd, and he was in this Hawaiian shirt. So I got along with him very, very well, and doing this, I helped him to serve the Mass and do the readings and work in the sacristy and take care of the robes and the garbs and everything that had to do with the sacristy sacrifices and the ferials and which are the feast days and the solemnities, and lay out the schedule and cards and work with the other priests. In doing that, I inadvertently and without my knowledge became his assistant officially, which meant I was his curate. And being a curate means anything that the bishop would tell me to do, I would have to do. And the head of our house said that would be fine. If you wanted to listen to the bishop, and he's in charge here, and it would be fine that you would work with him. And I said, fine. I didn't know that I was going to be, because of that position, auxiliary bishop. And he was often at that point in his life, he got sicker as he grew on and died of cancer eventually. I would often have to fill in for him. And being 22-year-old, with barely hair on my face at the time, I had to tell other priests and brothers what to do and give instructions to them. And the resentment just poured out like a fountain. I was almost drowned in resentment because people didn't want me to have that kind of authority. I didn't want to have that kind of authority. I didn't want to be there. I asked him, are you sure you want me to do this? And he says, yes, I'm sure. We get along really well. You know what I want. Take care of things. And I started to be very fastidious on doing things, just like I have been over the last few years in my life after I left seminary. I worked in classical music and on stage and did stage productions, choral productions, and a lot of stage management and production and direction. And that takes a lot of thinking, a lot of planning, a lot of work, a lot of setup, a lot of reading and going through the scores, doing the cue to cue, calling the shows, and that overflowed itself into my working with the Prophecy Conference in Winnipeg. And I was blessed to go from that point, from leaving the seminary, to go to the conferences. About a year after, I found out that conferences were going on. I missed the first year. I went to the second year, and I was asked, or I asked if I could come, if I would be welcome as an ex-priest or a person studying to be a priest would be welcome at their conference. And she said, you're more than welcome. And this is Marie Friesen. You probably know her. Yeah. You remember?
Yes.
Anyway, I'm supposed to give her a hug from you.
Okay.
And vice versa. She sent me along, and I started working with them and really enjoyed them. And I started working with my music, and I really started to enjoy that. But the problem was, I felt empty. Now, I'm going to get back to that right away. But my journey started off with a prayer. And I think the prayer might have been my undoing. Because instead of it being my own personal prayer, it was a copy and a little tweaking of my own of a prayer of St. Francis that he had made. So let me reiterate this prayer. Great and glorious God, my Lord Jesus Christ, I implore thee to enlighten me and to disperse the darkness of my soul, Give me true faith, firm hope, and perfect charity. Grant me, O Lord, to know Thee so well that in all things I may act in accordance with Thy most holy wisdom and will. Amen. So taking that as a buffer to the start of my career as a studying priest, I got along fairly well at first. I was fairly well obedient. And I started to ask questions, which was part of the downfall. And some of the questions they didn't particularly like. One including my novice master, whose name was Canisius-Session. And his German background and his brush cut that stood about 3 or 4 inches above his head, straight brush cut, you could hear coming from down the aisle. It was so profound. You could hear it. It made a whoosh in the wind. It was incredible. So you know he was coming. So if you were doing anything wrong, stop. Well, Canisius and I, within a short period of time, were at loggerheads about absolutely everything. Being the novice master, at the end of each day, we were supposed to have 10 minutes of what we had learned during the day, and how we had learned it, and where it came from, and our sources, and everything else, as if we were doing a book report. Well, when it came, after a few months working with him, and I was past the 10-minute mark to 15 to 20 minutes, he would say, sit down and shut up. So sit down and shut up became a nickname for me. And everyone in the seminary used it, including the kitchen staff and the nuns. Just sit down and shut up is here. So that would be my cue to not say anything or not speak anymore, because I started to believe myself an authority and everything. And of course, when I went in, I prepared myself with Thomas Merton, all of his works. I prepared myself with the whole omnibus of sources, everything that was written on St. Francis. So by the end of my first year, I was teaching Franciscan studies in the seminary to other guys that were a lot older than I was, and a lot more learned than I was, and had a lot more expertise than I did. But I was teaching them anyway, which acquired a lot of resentment. And I enjoyed doing that, and I enjoyed being part of that. But it started to take me apart. The joy I had when I came in and when I found out I was accepted was starting to dissipate very quickly. Very, very quickly. And over the years that I spent there, I was shuffled around to various places to see what my gifting would be, or what spiritual gift that I could pass on to others and give to others during my stay there. But it didn't work out as well as I wanted to. It started to get to a place where I was in despair. I was in hurt and pain because of some of the things I was seeing in the privy to. Being an assistant to a bishop and working for the house, I got to see things that I shouldn't have seen as the man and the bishop. I could see transactions behind the scenes. I got to see corruption happen. And I'm not sure if you people know about it here in England. But in Canada, the Franciscans were the vicars to a group called the Christian Brothers. And the Christian Brothers were only brothers because their founder, Edmund Rice, was not a priest. And they didn't have a priest to represent them. So we were their vicars. We took care of them. We did their mass and their sacraments, and we took care of them. So we'd have to go to their monasteries and their seminaries. And where I was stationed in a place called Orangeville, Ontario, not far from Monroe Mills, where they had their seminary, and we had our seminary in Orangeville. And this is just outside Toronto, Canada. We would go and minister to these young men. And there was an influx of young men. There's usually about 20, and it's quite a large building and quite a large area. It's quite nice and has a little lake beside it. It's quite placid. And I would enjoy going there because ours was just an old schoolhouse that we were in, and we had a little bit of property there, but not as nice and as much as they had. So I enjoyed going there in the mornings. We'd do the walk, and we'd have breakfast with them, and we'd do the mass, and then we'd leave. And that was part of my studies, to be able to watch the ritual, watch the priest move, help to serve in the mass, help to serve the brothers the bread and the wine. And I enjoyed doing that, and it was kind of a blessing to be able to do that and meet these men. And then all of a sudden, there's a scandal that broke out. And some people were pointing at the Christian Brothers. And I went back one morning, Sunday morning, we were doing the Mass there. We were prepared for breakfast, and I was prepared to see all the guys for breakfast because they all sit at the table together and we all came and sat. 4 of them were missing. I said, well, what happened? Well, they've been transferred. Well, I was at breakfast yesterday morning with you guys, and we were all together. When did they get transferred? Oh, they got transferred during the night. During the night. Oh, that's interesting. During the night they got transferred. Okay, where are they? Because one of them was a friend that became a close friend, and I sat beside him. Well, they're off. Well, a few years later, after I left seminary, I finally ran into him to see what had happened. And he said, well, I decided to leave. Well, according to what I had heard, you were dismissed during the night, and that's all I could find out. And they never knew where you went or whatever, so they were put in different areas. And at that time, in Newfoundland, at Mount Cashel, and you might have heard the words Mount Cashel, some of the men from Mount Cashel were sent to Ontario, to Montmills, and hidden at Montmills. Now, I don't know if these people were guilty of anything or not, but it just seemed odd that they were sent. And that why, at 22 years old, was I privy to this information? Why should I know this? And how should I know? And these kind of things fell into my lap. So I started asking questions about that. And I couldn't ask the very formal political questions that were happening because I would be slapped down. That's none of your business. Don't think about that. It's not your concern. Don't rock the boat. So I didn't want to rock the boat. Very bad. But I started asking the spiritual questions. And they didn't like that at all. Oh, it was maddening. It was maddening for them. It was maddening for me. One of the main questions that I asked is, by grace are ye saved through faith. By grace are ye saved through faith. And I asked the priest, Father, can you decipher me? Is that our faith in him or his faith in us? And he couldn't tell me. And then I asked another priest, and another, and another, and I asked the bishop. And I asked all the brothers what they thought about that. He said, well, that's not even a question. That's a non-question. It doesn't exist. I said, it must exist. It's touching my heart. Why is it existing? And he says, it's only for you. Just keep it to yourself. Don't bother with it. Well, I went on from there. And ever since that question, I started to ask other simple little questions. Little questions that should be asked. And as I was working on my formation and my vows, to simply vow to God that I would serve, the vows have changed each year and were more complicated and more divisive from serving God. The vows got into a place where I was going to serve God, but only through Mother Church. And I thought, well, if this is a vow that I'm making to restore my life and to find salvation, how come I have to make it through the church? Why do I have to do that? He said, well, this is just the pattern that we're doing. This is what you have to say when you're doing your vows. That you have to have your loyalty and your fealty to Mother Church and serve God through Mother Church. So I said, don't you think it should be the other way around? You should put this in its proper perspective. Well, that didn't work out. Of course, I was slapped onto that, and I was sent to the kitchen. And sending to the kitchen, I would have to peel potatoes because we had a retreat out there, and generally, over the week, there's anywhere from 50 to 100 people in the retreat house, and that was part of our service, and that was part of our community service. So I spent more time in the kitchen respecting more potatoes than I did my brothers and confreres and all the priests that came because they couldn't ask and answer my question. They wouldn't answer any of the questions I had. That's a non-question. So I got to respect the potatoes more than everyone, and that didn't go over too well. So they went out of their way to make things absolutely miserable for me in any possible way they could. And of course, at that particular point, I had moved out of the seminary, and I moved and started working with the bishop. Now the bishop was great. We had a great relationship for a long time, and for about a year and a half, I did a lot of subsidiary work for him. I found those things, but I also had to ask him questions. And I'm afraid my bishop could not answer my questions. They were intimate, they were personal questions, but why? Why do we have this? Why are we doing this? He said, this is the way it is, this is our tradition, this is how we work. This is how we function. We are running a church, we are running a bureaucracy. We are running a company. This is how it has to work. So you have to put away your spiritual inclination and go with the flow, because this is how business is run, and this is how we've been running it ever since the beginning. So I said, it's very hard to be part of this and know what's going on behind the scenes and be surprised at some of the things that were happening. The little things that started to really pick away at me and bother me is when we took a collection, and when I wasn't being the sacristan and working with the bishop on the dais and up there or doing the readings, I would be one of the people that would supervise the collections in the church. And then I was sent to another church. And when we went to the bigger church, there was 4,000 people at that church. It was a very Italian church, and it was run by an Italian parish out of St. Philip Neri in Toronto, Canada. So I was sent there for a few months, and we had collected a lot of money, a lot of money. And when you look at the amount of money that was collected and counted, and then you look at the books weren't quite what they should be. Some money was disappearing, and where did it go to? Because I was supposed to have known, like, if I'm helping to do the accounting and the counting of the money, I'd like to be able to put stuff into a ledger. He said, well, that's not your concern. You count the money, you put it on here, you put the denominations on, you put the amount you have, and you hand it in and go from there. So I wasn't allowed to go further back into the confines of where they kept the money and what they did with it. That was not part of my mandate to do that. All I just had to do was serve and help as much as I possibly could, which I did, and it was fine up until a point where things were disappearing. People were taking things. People were disappearing in the night. People were asking questions. Parishioners were asking questions. And I was told that I was not allowed to answer any of their questions. And they sequestered me even further. So when the bishop asked me to continue on with him and renew myself for a year, I said I couldn't for a while. I'd like a break. So he was obstinate on giving me a break, but he gave me a break for 3 months. And he said, come back in 3 months. It turns out that the next priest, or brother, actually he was a brother in his final stages of becoming a priest, about a year before ordination, he had taken on the position, and he was ordained by the bishop a year later. He had taken on that position, and because of my leaving, and because of my obstinacy and my questioning, I lost the opportunity to be that man. And he became bishop 19 years later. He became that bishop 19 years later of that diocese. And the greeting I got from him, because he was one of my rivals and conquerors, and he was 3 years ahead of me at the seminary, he tells me that if you would have kept your mouth shut, said nothing, you would be where I am now. And I said, I would like to be where you are now, because your position over me is so rough that you're sending me to nowhere. So I was carted off to nowhere after that. And as I was carted off to nowhere and sent into oblivion, my novice master and formation master, after my novitiate year, Canisius cycled me once again because they had a lack of men there. He says to me, you're leaving now, you're going to a new parish. He says, many are called and few are chosen. And I looked back at him, I said, if you're one of the chosen ones, we are in a lot of trouble. And of course, none of this stuff went over nicely. And for quite a while, I was alone at a hermitage, and I met an old priest. And he was on sabbatical, and he looked like he was beaten over the years for all his service to the church and all of his things that he did, all of his spiritual upbringing. He was desolate, alone. So they sent me to work with him, and that made things all the worse. because I started to take on some of his problems and work with him. And I enjoyed him. His name was Father Pat McCarroll, and he was an artist. And he was away, and he had a breakdown just prior to being sent to that seminary. And this is in Orangeville, Ontario. So I spent a year with him and worked with him and talked with him. And this is after I had been told by this young man that he's now the curate, the auxiliary bishop. And had I kept my mouth shut, I would have had a position and power. Power I never wanted in the first place. Power I never looked for. I wanted to go as a Franciscan, a very humble man to go to the missions and work with the poor. That's all I wanted. I didn't want any position, I didn't want any office, I didn't even want the studies as much as I could handle them. But the studies came quickly, I did well with them, I excelled in a lot of areas. I got very good in catechetics, so they wanted me to go into canon law. And I was hoping not to go into canon law because of being academic life. And the person that did go into canon law behind me went and got the privilege, and at this time, I thought it was a great privilege, to work in the Vatican with John Vaughan, the Vicar General of the Franciscan Order. And John and I, when he came, he was the guest of the bishop, and I served while he was here, as Jacob would come to Winnipeg, and I would serve and help him do what I possibly could during Jacob's stay in Winnipeg. I was that kind of facilitator, kind of like our Steve is a facilitator for everything. And it was kind of nice. I got to be able to do that, meet him, and enjoy that. But this man went on to more success, and he went on into canon law, and he had a very good career in it, and he died a few years ago, unfortunately. Very nice man. But I went off into a set of despair. And one of the things that bothered me about this despair is it started to affect my heart, it started to affect my thinking, and it started to affect my mind. So I turned to the only source I could find. I turned back to Scripture. I had learned the catechism, I had learned the rituals of the church, I had learned their methods, their ways, I had learned their politics, I had bit my tongue a number of times, I spent endless hours in the kitchen peeling potatoes in various seminaries. That's my claim to fame. And I was wasting away because the joy that I had when I first started was not there any longer. And this was the problem. So I turned to God. Psalm 25:16. Turn thee unto me and have mercy upon me, for I am desolate and afflicted. And I prayed to God for salvation. A real, pure salvation in my formation. I had all the things that I needed to serve the church. All the ideas I had. But I had a desolate soul. Desolate. I was angry. Why is this happening? Why can't these people answer my questions? It's a simple question. Is it faith in God, our faith in Him, or is His faith in us that has created us, that has given us mercy, that has given us salvation? Is it? What is it? Can you tell me? They cannot tell me. So upon trying to get that ordination, it didn't work out for me at all. I was hurt by it. I prayed to God to help me find it, and I couldn't find it, no matter what I did. So by grace are you saved through faith, and not a gift of yourself. And it was the gift of myself. Yes, it's myself. So I had a problem. I had expectations of the priesthood. I had expectations of who I should be at this time, of what rank I should have, and what position I have. Big mistake. Big mistake. That was the biggest mistake I ever made. So I came across this nice little hole, which broke my back. And it broke my heart. And it broke my soul. And I'd like to repeat it to you. Let me find it. I think it's right here. Yes. It's called Castles. And it's by a woman named Lois C. Wilson. It was not so very long ago. I built castles in the air. Splendid towers of silver and gold. And coaches to take me there. Though I dwelt in a humble cottage, I had my castle schemes. My world was filled with wishes and my magnificent castle dreams. Day and night, I made this chase, crawling and climbing the uphill road so I could win the race. Now I find that I'm a loser. The best in life is free. Someone stole my castles, and the thief I found was me. This is supposed to be a testimony unto God of what I did and where I was. But I have to admit it's very little testimony and more confession. It took a long time to evacuate my soul of the church. It hurt me dearly to have to leave because I couldn't work under the circumstances. I couldn't function under the circumstances. I was not the man God would have wished me to be. The problem I found was in me. I was the cause of my own distress. It's like getting hit with a shovel. How could I have done this? And when I look back over it, because it took 2 years to straighten out my life and straighten out my mind and my heart about leaving. I left seminary with $80 in my pocket to start a new life. I had nothing else. I had one small suitcase and a typewriter. I left to start a new life. And was it a life for Jesus? Was I saved? I asked God, I pleaded for Him. Could I do this? And I turned around and went back to a diocesan seminary. And I started formation in the diocesan seminary, which was a lot less personal than working with Franciscans and being a part of a Franciscan group in months. I started back on that road, and I thought that would cure my soul and help me move along, and help me to find God again, and help me to live a life again in some joy, find my own joy. Well, I was looking for my own joy in all this process. I was looking for where I fit in and what contribution I could give, what talent I could do. And in music, when I left seminary, I found a lot of joy in music, a lot of people enjoying their music, a lot of singers that were wonderful, a lot of stars that come from all over the world that I got to work with and privileged to work with, and the crews behind the scenes that made everything happen. And for the 40 years, almost 40 years since then, I have learned a lot. But back then, I was desolate. I wanted the salvation of God. And it was so very hard to find it, to think that it existed, that it would be for me, or that I would have the privilege to do it. And God still didn't answer my prayers and my questions. Finally, in this poem that broke me, I was able to listen to the words of God for the first time. Really listen to them. Really enjoy what He had said. He had said one more little thing that caught my attention. In 1 Corinthians 15, though I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, and have not charity, I have become a sounding brass or a tinkling cymbal. Though I have the gift of prophecy and understand mysteries and knowledge, and I have all faith so as to remove mountains, and I have not charity, I am nothing. Absolutely nothing. So once you get to the point of being nothing and guilty, because only then did I see what I was guilty of and what problems that I brought to my brethren, and I asked them for their assistance in showing me who God was. I was angry with them. They couldn't show me who God was because they didn't know. And you can't blame them for something that they didn't know because it wasn't part of the curriculum. They didn't learn about God. They knew as much as I did. They were as lost as I was. That played on my soul. So I asked God for salvation. And then I stopped asking for salvation. And when I stopped asking for salvation, I started asking God to save me from myself. And only when I asked Him to save me from myself and my predilections and my pride and my ignorance and my thoughtlessness, only then did I start to learn of God, who He was, what He is, and what He has done for us. I had learned of His love, His compassion, the blood that He shed for me, the dying on the cross, His gospel, and everything else broke out. And it broke out into a new life. And I tried to carry that life into the music community and into the people I worked with, and in the churches that we did shows in, and to meet people and greet people in the Spirit of God and the Spirit of love. I came across Marie Friesen and the group with the Winnipeg Prophecy Conference. They became my spiritual family, my friends, and my support group. They prayed for me and worked with me every day. And then eventually we came into the Friends of Israel. The Friends of Israel is a wonderful group. Well-meaning, but very political as well. They do some wonderful work, and the men are very learned, and the people that speak with them, their organization is very full, and we're not used to a full organization. They have ranking positions, and we work with them well, and it's been fun to do that. And I've learned a lot from them, and I share with them, and I've come out of the church damaged and bruised. And I was angry with them. But I could not, in the end, blame them for something that they didn't know, or they couldn't tell me, or they couldn't make me feel. I was angry with myself, and it was my own breakdown, my own fault. And then when I found out afterwards that I was an idolater, that I went along with the ritual to kneel in front of candles, of statues, and pay homage to this, and then read in Scripture that this was an abomination to God. This was untenable for me. What have I done? How could a learned, fairly intelligent young man fall into such stupidity? I blame myself for that. All the signs were there. I ignored the signs. I ignored those little things that God was trying to tell me to do all the way through. It was those other things that were bothersome, that I had learned from, that I had stepped away from, which was really unfortunate. I didn't know the signs because I wasn't looking for the signs. And then all of a sudden, the signs started to come up. Especially when I asked Him to save me from myself and all of my pride and my ambition and all the things that were going on inside my heart. And when He did that, I started to see everything clearly. It took a long time, and it took a long time to make the transition. And then at the conference, I was pulled over the top into salvation and into the arms of our Lord with the help of Dave Hunt, and he's got one of his books back on the thing here, you probably know him, and Rob Linstead. This is a gentleman from the United States. And over the years, I had a rich relationship with both of them, and with Ruth Hunt, and a rich relationship with many of the authors that had come, many of the speakers, great friendships, and through this, I'm here today. And I appreciate being here today. But in all this, I have to admit that in myself, there was a great failure. And to look at myself heartily and with humility, and have myself destroyed in this, and do the damage to myself, was untenable for me. I had to rebuild my faith and everything from scratch. And I praise God, and praise the Lord in His infinite wisdom, His mercy, and His shed blood, that I survived this terrible Holocaust. For me, it was the end of everything, the end of all my hopes. And it was something that I wanted so badly when I first started. It was something that I hoped for, and that had touched my heart since grade 7. I thought I was on the right path, making the right decisions and right choices. It didn't turn out that way. But it did turn out that Jesus, our Lord, had to grab me by the scruff of the neck and pull me kicking and screaming into salvation. That's the only way I was willing to go. But once I was over the hurdle, I started to believe again. I started to love again. I started to let people in my life again, and let people work in me, and I can work in them, and give back a little of what God had given me, and the grace God had given me to continue with my work. Now, in my new life, away from seminary, I've been to many churches and worked with many people, and I ask them what they believe and how they believe it. I've got to work with some talented people that sing sacred music, beautiful music, And we played with some wonderful orchestras from all over the world, had come to Winnipeg and come to Canada. And I was able to go on tour in 2005 to Japan and China. And I'm able to be here now, by the grace of God, to speak God for the first time in my life. I have no authority, no dignity in and of myself to be able to speak the word of God. After what I have done and what I have been involved in, I should not be able to even speak the word of God or his name. But in grace, he has let me share a testimony and share my confession with you on what I was and what I could have been. And it basically broke my life in half, and my heart. But now I'm renewed in him. I trust only in him. There is nothing else but him. There is no truth but him.
Amen.
And I live in and for him
Amen.
only. And that's all I have, and that's all I want.
Amen.
God bless you. Thank you very much.